Hey guys, it's Roderick. I'm here with let's talk about the Mayfair Witches, okay? Because I feel like my reviews for the past few episodes have been a little convoluted because there have been so many problems and the problems have been overshadowing the actual kind of review of the episode. So I want to sit down, let's talk about this first 4 episodes and really dive in and do a biopsy about what is going on with Mayfair Witches at this point. So if you're new to this channel, welcome. This is where we talk about television shows, reality television, films with an eye towards filmmaking, acting, and directing, okay? So I have 5 points I wanna make about the Mayfair Witches. And if you watch my show, if you watch The Handmaid's Tale, you know how I typically say don't like to denigrate anybody's work, right? But at the point where a show has so many obvious flaws, I have to think about the fact if I put something out there that was so flawed, I can't be mad about the criticisms, right? Because somebody has to know at this point that the Mayfair Witches, as it stands with 4 episodes, is not hitting it and is really almost harming the effort of creating this immortal universe, which I have said from the beginning is a great episode, is a great concept, right? And I bring you to think about this, right? If you all remember the meme, the gif of Tyra Banks being like, with her red hair, talking about, I was rooting for you. I remember watching that episode live when it came on. I was like 25, 26 when it came on. And I was like, Tyra, girl, you going in too much. What, girl, it doesn't require all of that. But as I've gotten older, 20 years later, right, I know the frustration of when you put in time, energy, and money into something and get the de minimis return, right? And that is why as I watch Mayfair Witches, I get such a good reaction, because in today's streaming society with so many other shows and options that are vying for our time, and we know that time is the one thing in this world we can't get back, when you watch a show with such high hopes and it falls short, you feel some sort of way. So now I owe an apology to Tyra Banks, because now, girl, I understand why you were mad, right? Because no one wants to invest time in watching a show and feel some sort of way episode after episode after episode when you have such high hopes and aspirations, and there is another product in that universe that has exceeded expectations, right? So why is the Mayfair Witches like this? These are my opinions. These are not facts. I don't know nobody who produces the show. I don't got a show on AMC, but as a person who has written 8 screenplays, adapted 2 books, right, and is a trained actor and a director, I can tell you from my vantage point what I perceive to be the flaws in Mayfair Witches. Some of you may disagree, some of you may agree. Let's have that comments in the comment section. Just remember to be respectful. So here's the first problem that is very obvious. The writers who write for Mayfair Witches are incapable of taming what seems to be an unwieldy source material, right? So when you're adapting a screenplay, unlike when you are creating your own screenplay, as I've said, you're bound kind of by the source material. The leeway that you could use is really based upon the agreement you have with the author or the author's estate as to how much variance or creative license you may have, right? So if you think about, for instance, Harry Potter, right? Because J.K. Rowling is alive, and was alive at the time of the filming and the creation of the scripts, she had a certain amount of input and direction as to an explanation as to what these characters have, right? So that the films did not really substantially deviate from the source material. Now, they may have been changed in tone, they may have been changed in a slight characterization, but she obviously felt enough that the films that were produced, right, that went to filming, that were created, were in line or in essence with what she created as a character. I recognize that Mayfair Witches is at a disadvantage because Anne Rice is no longer living, right? So therefore, Anne Rice cannot really talk or consult with the creators of this show as to what she really envisioned and hoped for. They have her notes, they have their interviews, they have her son, but the creator of the source material is not alive. However, it is also an opportunity because you have another iteration of another show. So what the writers did, right? So because the source material spans different generations, focuses on different characters, they literally had to make a decision, right? So we're talking about choices again. So they decided that the main character that we're going to focus on is Rowan, and we're going to show Rowan's narrative up until this point, is end point of like the 8 or 10 episodes, right? And the way in which we're going to tie back, right, the other flashbacks is we're going to have a flashback every episode about our ancestors, right? The problem is the flashbacks that they use do not help propel the narrative. Remember talking about, I've discussed in other videos about flashbacks are very tricky because it's a very lazy way of doing exposition, but it can be useful if it gives us some type of new type of information, right? Because what the show has kind of setting up to be is, in a television show, there are going to be usually three or four storylines, right? And at the end of every episode, typically the storylines will either intertwine or meet, or in some shows, the storylines don't intertwine and meet until later in the season, right? So you have your A storyline, your B storyline, your C storyline, sometimes a D, but it's usually a lot shorter than that. So currently as it is, our A storyline is Rowan discovers she's a witch. Lasher's intentions for Rowan is our B storyline, and now they have inserted this Brotherhood of Witches, Brotherhood of Anti-Witches as our C storyline, right? Now, theoretically, that makes sense. We could do that, but there has been no intersection. I take that back. The D storyline is the history of the Mayfair. So there are really four storylines, but they're not tying them or intersecting them together enough such that we either care about Rowan's plight, we know enough about why she's in danger, or we have any sense of what's going on, right? So at this point, there just seem to be four miscellaneous storylines. That is because the writers, that was a choice. That was a creative choice. The better way to structure this show would have been to have A storyline, Rowan discovers she's a witch. B storyline, the history of the Mayfairs. C storyline, Lasher's intentions with Rowan and his past relations with the Mayfairs. Those three storylines are what the main storylines could have been. Because if you typically think about most shows, right, by the third or fourth episode, you usually have a full flashback episode, right? A full episode that kind of gives us a context of what we're seeing, why we're seeing it, and whatever like that. But that was a creative choice, right? So the fact is that the show opted not to do that, but has given us these kind of miscellaneous storylines, and the writers are not able to really connect all of them together because they literally just potentially either lack the ability or creativity to really do that. Because we really have not moved this narrative any further, right? We're not really invested in Rowan's journey, right? Because all we really want to see is, like, how does this connect? How does this build into the universe or whatever like that? So let's talk about the assignment, right? Because I think that's the biggest point of my frustration. The assignment was, all you had to do was establish Rowan's character, establish Lasher as the antagonist, and connect it to Interview with the Vampire. That was all you had to do. That bar was so low. Interview with the Vampire created the world of New Orleans, the world of vampires, the knowledge that other things are happening. It did a fantastic job. All Mayfair Witches had to do was come in, establish the fact that this is occurring in New Orleans. They did that, right? Establish Rowan's character as a member of this supernatural society. They kind of did that. And then establish why Lasher is onto Rowan and then connect it to Interview with the Vampire. That was the assignment. And at this point, they're literally failing, right? Because someone made a comment that the person in the window in the source material is really Lestat, right? Which would have been a perfect way to tie in the two universes together. So you say, Roderick, where do you get this from? Why do you say this? I'll give you two examples. So let's use our first, using our Harry Potter example. In Harry Potter does not come face to face with Voldemort until the fourth movie, right? We know Voldemort exists. We know the history of Voldemort with Harry Potter. We know the machinations of Voldemort behind the scenes. Harry does not face off with Voldemort until the fourth episode. In the interim of the fourth movie, between the first film and the fourth film, we see Harry getting ready for his eventual meeting with Voldemort by getting him ready, learning new spells, and all these different things, right? All Mayfair Witches had to do was establish the existence of Lasher working in the backgrounds, and then give us an eventual meeting with Lasher and Rowan, ultimately in the second or third season, right? You could have spent the whole first season talking to us about the history of the Mayfairs, Rowan discovering she's a witch, Lasher in the background making moves, and we could have just literally, that's all the assignment. And then tie in Lestat, have a Lestat showing. I was at Lestat's house for a party. Oh, I heard they murdered those vampires at this or whatever. That's all you had to do. That was the assignment. So here's our second example. As we know, and if you've watched the Avengers movies, okay, we know that Thanos does not show up until later on in the episode in his films when his final confrontation with the Avengers, okay? But we know Thanos is working in the background from the first one. We know his assignment. We know what he's doing and why he's a dangerous antagonist. That's all we needed to know from this first season. And the fact is that Mayfair Witches has not done that, right? So we don't understand what Lasher is, why he's dangerous, what's his, what does he want if you did not read the source material. And the fact is you should not have to read the source material to understand a character's motivations and his objectives if your intention is to bring and create a whole new audience, right? Because these books have been out for 30 years. You have a whole new demographic who never saw them, who never read the books, who could totally latch on into this new universe as you created it. People aren't going back and reading the Infinity Stones created by Marvel back in the 80s. People aren't reading old Black Panther comic books. Some are, but they're happy to delve and and adopt this new universe as it's shown to them because it has given them something to care about, right? So this is the problem. You have writers who are incapable of taming this script and making it a creative narrative that fits within this universe, establish the character within the universe, and establish its connection to the overarching larger antagonist, right? There's all this. Even the Hulk movie with Edward Norton had an end credit scene with Robert Downey Jr. showing up when talking about the Avengers. That's all you have to do. You have to tie the universe together. That's why we bought into this. That's why we're watching this. We love this universe. Tie it in and create a universe. And they're not doing that, and they're failing at the assignment and doing that. Now, the next point is the creative choices by the showrunners and the directors overpower the source material, right? So it's kind of obvious the virtue signals that they're sending with the creative choices. For example, there is a creative choice in this episode to show women of a certain intelligence having agency, being independent, and having some sense of control over their life. That is a creative choice. And that is not a creative choice I disagree with. But when you use that choice to overpower and require us to suspend our disbelief of realistic choices, then it looks like these choices are taking supremacy over the source material. As I said in the last video, you're not going to tell me that any surgeon who's from San Francisco would show up to her biological mother's funeral in Vans and a black dress. I'm not buying this, right? I'm just not going to buy it, right? Now, if the source material says that she showed up with a dress and a Vans, then I'll take all that back. Y'all let me know. But I don't believe Anne Rice wrote a book where this surgeon shows up in a dress and black Vans. But I may be wrong, right? That there's another creative choice, not to overly sexualize the female characters or the actresses in this and make it really be about the narrative. That is another great choice. You should do that, right? But when the scene or the moment calls for sex scenes to be done, do the sex scene, right? If there are ways in which you could do sex scenes and intimacy scenes now that you don't have to necessarily have her topless and breasts flopping out about, but that you can make it sensual, you can make it intimate, and you can make it impactful. They're not doing that because their choice is not to over-sexualize the show. It's like having a recipe, right? And then you putting your twist on the recipe by adding spices and the whole dish tastes bad, right? That's why Mayfair Witches leave such a bad taste in my mouth, because they've deviated so much from the recipe and adding their own little whatever in it. Like smoked paprika don't have to go in everything, right? It's a great spice, it's a great dish, but you ain't got to put it in everything. And I feel like the showrunners and the directors are just sprinkling on whatever and deviating from the basic fundamentals of the recipe. And also, as I established, some of the writers can't cook. So, anywho, that's the other thing. My fourth point is The reason the Mayfair Witches is so frustrating is that this is squandering goodwill. Because as I've established, Mayfair Witches was playing with house money. Because Interview with the Vampire came out and was such a critical success, right? The bar was so low. All they had to do were the three things I established earlier: establish Rowan within the universe, establish her protagonist, tie her into Interview with the Vampire. That's all they had to do, and literally it would have been a critical success. But instead, they decided to squander our goodwill and our time, so it leaves a bad taste in our mouth for the entire Immortal universe. And I'm sure AMC is not paying money to have people watch Interview with a Vampire and not watch Mayfair Witches, therefore, because you squandered our goodwill with Mayfair Witches, when you come out with the next series or the next product in this Immortal universe, we're going to be side-eyeing it because we don't trust you. Right? Because look, if you gave us Interview with the Vampire and then you gave us Mayfair Witches, we're going to be wondering and guessing, what is this going to be? And yes, we'll watch, but we will be less likely to follow through and be committed to the show because you squandered our goodwill with a half-baked product when the bar was very low for Mayfair Witches. And squandering goodwill in these days and times where subscription prices keep rising and time is very limited, it's not something good. And I want Mayfair Witches to succeed. Let me be clear. I want this show to be great. I want this Immortal universe to literally be like the rival to the Marvel universe because I think it was a fantastic idea. I think it's a fantastic concept. And I think there is space and time to really kind of make these corrections. Because at the end of the day, these AMC shows are also highlighting a lot of people of color, gay, lesbian, and trans characters and actors. And I really want this universe to succeed. But you have to do it correctly, and you have to not let your creative choices overpower the source material, because that's really what we're seeing now. So let's go into how things can be fixed in my perspective, right? I'm not going to talk about casting. I'm never going to advocate or say that anybody should be replaced or fired or whatever like that. That's never going to be my thing, right? Because casting is what casting is, and now we're getting used to people. So you got to make do with what you got, right? I will say that the costuming and the makeup of Lasher needs to substantially change. Like, because there's nothing that's given me, I want to give up my Jesus and my life with the current actor, right? And that's nothing towards the actor. That is a writer problem, and that is a makeup and hair problem all the way together. Like, Lasher just doesn't give me, I'm gonna forsake praying, right? And I'm gonna try to have sex with this quasi-demon, whatever like that, right? So that is a direction, makeup, hair thing, right? So that's all I'm gonna say with that. Let's get to the writing. The writers need to learn how to really tame this source material, right? So whether that means having an episode next season that's fully in the backstory of Lasher, communicating with all the other designees, whether you need to dedicate some time to fully flush out this world, you have to do a better job of creating and taming this and giving us 3 or 4 storylines that are going to intersect at least one or every other episode, right? Because at this point, none of the storylines are connecting, right? And since you're squandering our goodwill with these needless episodes that are moving at such a slow pace, and your run times, without commercials, is clocking about 42 minutes, you don't have that much time, right? So you kind of move. And I understand that storytelling requires a depth understanding of pacing, right? So pacing is when you're typically in films, you'll have like action, and then the narrative kind of slows down, right? And so I understand pacing is part of the art form, but everything in Mayfair Witches seem to be going at such a slow motion, and we're ending every episode with like, okay, now what? And so, but we're not really getting hooked. Think about it this way. By episode 4 of Interview with the Vampire, Louis is already a vampire, right? So he has already been seduced by Lestat, then they had their floaty air sex, and they're happily living as a gay vampire couple by episode 4. We are nowhere close to that type of character arc with Rowan, right? It looks like she may cast her best spell her first spell by like episode 5, maybe episode 6. So you don't wasted 6 episodes, and the witch who's supposed to be this really powerful witch ain't casted nary a spell, and we won't get this by the end of episode 6. Squandering time, squandering goodwill. So the next thing I think is there, because we're connecting universes and we're connecting characters that are from the source material interact with each other, it seems to me there needs to be some sort of collaboration between the showrunners of one show and the showrunners from the other show, right? I still think that maybe part of the problem with Mayfair Witches is that it should have been the first one, right? And then if Mayfair Witches was the first and Interview with the Vampire was second, I don't think our reactions would be so acerbic, right? But the fact is that also the fact is, because Interview with the Vampire went first, it lowered the bar of what Mayfair Witches had to do, right? So I don't think there has to be some sort of collaboration moving forward with Mayfair Witches and with the other shows in this universe so that they're all tied together, right? Think about again, Ant-Man, She-Hulk, all these Marvel properties are all tied together in the same collective narrative with the same collective vision going towards the same end result, right? Even though they're all individual shows, right? There is a tie that binds them all together. Sometimes they were done well, sometimes they were done bad. But the formula for building a universe remains the same. The recipe remains the same. Don't mess with the recipe unless you know how to cook. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm glad we had this time together because now we move on to episode 5. I will not have to bring up any of these things again. Hopefully they will not occur again because we still have some time left. Like, things can really turn their way around, but I really felt like I needed to get this out my system because I just couldn't take it anymore, right? Episode 4 just really left me with after the entire thing. So now we can move on. We've discussed our problems. We've had our let's talk, and hopefully we won't have to have another one of these conversations. I want the season finale of Mayfair Witches to be like, child, I was wrong. I was so impatient. I don't know what I was thinking. I want it to end on such a great high level, and that is my hopes for this show. So anyway, thank you all for watching. Drop down in the comments. Let's have this discussion, right? What are you thinking about this so far? Because I'm very interested to know your perspectives, whether you're an actor, writer, screenwriter, director, or just a person who enjoys the show. Because again, ain't nobody got time or money to be wasting, watching shows that aren't really enjoyable or whatever like that. So anyway, have a great start of your week. Happy Monday, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.